Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé broadcast number 765. 765. That's right, 765. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do tonight for your kind consideration. Everyone's doing a top 10 list, so why don't we? We do have a top 10 list for you. And other shenanigans like our mailbag and Albon's cats, of course, which is always fun. But before getting into any of that stuff, I have to introduce my guest, my co-host tonight, which of course means that's exactly right. You know where I got to go, all the way to the right coast of our nation's country, nestled in our nation's capital, the swamp. Oh, you know her, the lovely, the redoubtable.
Grace!
Grace, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's amazing what a week difference makes. So
I know. It is. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. This time last week we were like under 8 inches of snow. This week there's nothing. So
That's crazy.
it's all good.
Telling you, it's crazy. See, we're already just a couple minutes into the podcast and people are already.
Get in there, Lewis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where is Lewis? I know everybody's. Well, we're going to
That's
talk
right.
about Lewis. We'll talk about other things tonight.
Maybe.
And now everybody's kind of like, okay, yeah, come on, man. Come on.
Get to the show!
This is the show.
This is the show.
We
man.
haven't even gone off topic for 5 seconds. I mentioned
I know.
snow. People need to calm down, right? Like this is the off season. You're lucky that we went 2 seconds before, we talked
know.
about racing. So
Talking
calm
about
down.
the weather. It is
Well,
cold here, Grace.
it's cold here too. I mean, we don't get snow here very often like that. So
Snow in the swamp.
yeah, it's just like out of nowhere. I mean, I think it saves it up, right? Like
Sure.
instead of like in Pennsylvania where you get snow consistently year round, not year round, right? All winter. And then here it's just like, oh, we don't have snow for like 5 years. And then it's just snow. It's like all the snow, 5 years worth of snow all at once. So
Wasn't it like out by Tahoe or something, like 200 inches or something?
oh my God.
It's like, whoa. That's a
Yes,
bunch of snow.
I don't know. That's a lot. I don't
That's
even
a
know
lot
what
of
that.
snow. Grace, I gotta say right up front, for those of you watching this podcast on YouTube, I am digging the brand new, hot off the press, Parc Fermé, brand new logo shirt you got on.
That's right. We got the swag.
Got the swag, looks awesome, looks great. If
Yes.
you folks would like to have a t-shirt with the brand new Parc Fermé logo on it and show your support, you can do that if you go to our website.
right.
It's pretty darn
Yeah.
cool.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, pretty nice. Well, look, Grace, I was scouring the interwebs over the last week, and I was looking at different articles, different news articles about Formula One, and I happened to stumble upon a article over at F1's website, f1.com.
All right.
Apologies, I can't remember the gentleman's name who wrote the article, but it was basically they were saying the top 10 things every F1 fan should be excited about in 2022. Now, apart from this whole, I don't know what's going on, but this whole trend in journalism to imply what someone should think or imply what somebody should automatically feel about a topic in their headlines. I don't know what's going on with that, which I think is kind of junk journalism, but I'm not a fan of that. I thought, though, it would be good. I read the article. Some of the top 10 things I agree with, some of them I don't. And that's to be expected, different fans. And were you going to sneeze? Yes.
Yes, there it is. I knew it was in there.
That's why we do a live podcast. And most people say, Todd, just edit that out. No.
We are live to
They
tape
did.
here. We're
I
all
know.
business.
I know. And I'm just like learning one specific thing on how to just live stream these to YouTube. So anyway, I read those and I thought, okay, well, if I was to put together a top 10 list of the top 10 things I'm excited about in
right.
2022, what would those be? So that's what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to cover my top 10 list. We're going to cover Grace's top 10 things, and we're going to fit those in somehow in between this next podcast. But I'm very keen to understand what your list of things you're excited about. So feel free, when we post this, you can either leave the comments in the YouTube comment section. You can go to our website, with the podcast post and leave them there. But I'm very intrigued to see if any of those things line up with what we're thinking or what the gentleman wrote at f1.com. So anyway, let's jump in to the top 10 things, shall we? We'll start off. Let's get into number one. So number one for me, Grace, is Lewis's return. So much has been made about whether Lewis will return or not. And while I think he will, it will be interesting to see his approach. While everyone else has weighed in on the Abu Dhabi incident, Lewis has been completely silent since that race. And I kind of feel like when he finally does decide to start talking again or, getting back into the series, I expect a full barrage of Abu Dhabi related questions. This whole Abu Dhabi thing will resurface in the media. It'll be all everyone's talking about if Lewis is commenting on it. And the issue will probably be a hot topic again, or at least for a little while. That's kind of my hunch. I'm guessing what could happen. If he doesn't come back, well, I think he will. But if he didn't, who would you call up? For me, I would try to steal Pierre or Pierre Gasly or Lando Norris, I think, if it were me. Or if it were you, would you try to pull Valtteri back in? We were just joking, Valtteri, we still love you, that sort of thing.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. Alpha doesn't need you. We loved you all along.
Aren't we funny?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're going to make a great wingman for George Russell. I suspect Merck know what Lewis's intent are, but it's fun to speculate anyway. So
That's
I
right.
think it'll be interesting. I just had a patron call, so I'm trying to do these more regular with our top tier patron supporters, and it's just me and all of our top tier patron supporters, like $20 a month and higher. And I had these calls, and we jump on my Zoom and we talk about these things. And I was asking them kind of what they thought about the whole silence thing, and if Lewis is how that whole approach is, what do they think of it? We had a great dialogue. So anyway, I bring that up because it was great to spend an hour with those Patreon supporters. So thanks to all of you that joined that call. It was wonderful to do that. So that's my number one thing, Grace. Do you have anything centered around Lewis or Merck or anything?
I had something centered around Mercedes, not so much Lewis. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think it's unusual that he's quiet. I think this is kind of everybody's quiet time until we kind of get to practice, right? In February, like everybody will be talking soon enough. I think that they all kind of take this time to lay low, enjoy the holidays, enjoy their families, and most people kind of keep out of the press at this time of the year. So I don't necessarily find that unusual. And yeah, he's been talking to Mercedes. I mean, we haven't heard any of the like the contract negotiations that we had a couple years ago where it was just like, that's all we heard about every week. So nobody's talking about it. I don't think it's a big deal. I think he'll be back. But so I think for my first thing related to Mercedes is that I'm going to make this a twofer, is I think that I'm mostly interested in how George is going to do at Mercedes. I think that we all had really high expectations for him. And then when he subbed for Lewis, and it was like, because I think as Formula One fans, right, we have high expectations about a lot of things, and then we're disappointed, right? It's kind of like being a Browns fan or something, right? Like you're used to having expectations and having them ripped out from underneath you.
Right.
And so I think that George is showing this potential. He really seems to be what we want him to be. He has had the experience at Mercedes. And so I think that is the one I think more than Lewis, I'm more interested to see how this synergy with George is going to work. Because, I mean, Bottas for sure wasn't like, I'm just going to be a number two. That wasn't his intent either.
Right.
But, George certainly isn't going to play that game, and he's got to make hay while he can. Right. Because if he is good, this is the best opportunity for a show. Because once Lewis moves on, it won't, to be able to say, I beat Lewis Hamilton. What did you do? Right. Like that means a lot. So I think he's going to make hay. So I think George Russell is the story of Mercedes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm very excited to see how George does. No doubt about it. My second one was the regulation changes. So I'm excited to see, will the new like wheel size, the new ground effects, reliance, front and rear wing, and other changes really work. I suspect some of them will, and some won't be as good, maybe. But as we discussed yesterday on our Patreon call, teams will exploit and push every possible limit of each regulation, and in doing so, they have very little regard on what it may or may not do to the racing or entertainment spectacle. Think of the past with all of them just sitting in the garage waiting to the last minutes to go out, right? And we're like, oh, well, that's kind of boring. Yeah, well, that's the regulations.
An hour of this.
Yeah,
Great.
that's what it is. Think of all the lift and coasting, right? And we're like, oh, well, what's all the lift and coasting? Well, that was the fastest and best way for these teams to execute on the regulations as presented to them. They didn't care whether we were excited at home and it was putting on a great show. They couldn't care less. And so I think there'll be some of that. And it remains to be seen what elements might, be exploited. But it was their interpretation of the regulations and the best way for them to maximize those regulations. So Merck has already said that their car will look quite a bit different than what F1's mock-up version did.
Well, right.
And I would expect that from all the teams, really. But the most interesting thing will be to see the difference or the differences in aero design between the teams and how they've all interpreted the regulations. We brought this up in the call with Patreon folks yesterday. Is there room, and Ilya, I think, brought this up, but is there room for a trick dual diffuser type of innovation within this set of regulations to be exploited at the first race or first practice or whatever you might see? So sometimes when they have these big regulation changes, somebody will show up with some really trick thinking out of the box.
Right.
And it's got everybody on their heels trying to play catch up. Think of 2009 with the dual diffuser. So that'll be interesting for me to see how the interpretations, I know what the regulations are, and it'll be interesting to see if they work for sure. But most importantly, it'll be how the teams interpret those regulations.
You understand what the regulations are because you're not Michael Massey, right? That's the obvious joke there.
Right.
This is why whatever you're into, you have to drag your spouse into it as well, or your significant other, or whoever you live with, your roommate, right? Like, because that is literally like, the lights don't, we miss the green light. Oh, Michael Massey, like everything now. Like I used to blame Chris Bangle for everything. I mean, Chris Bangle hasn't worked at BMW in like 25 years, but anytime I'm like, that car looks terrible, it could not even be a BMW, I'm like, I blame Chris Bangle for that, right? Michael Massey is my new Chris Bangle. I just blame him for everything. Like they don't have my bread at the store, Michael Massey's fault. So of course you understand the regulations because you're not Michael Massey.
Right.
So for the regulations, I mean, I think it's hard to not, put this pretty high on the list for people because, the regulations, we've been waiting for them, right? Thanks COVID again, for yet one more thing that's been a disruption in our life was we were supposed to already have these regulations in place. And there's always excitement at the beginning of a season. The races are a little, jumbled. They're not in the usual order. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what teams bring to the first race, what they, bring to Spain, how the different cars, how they look from that, like that spec car that they showed us, for the season. So I went with, yes, I'm very interested in all these aero changes. I think that's always interesting. And, we got rid of the squiggly bits. And so but the wings are cleaner. Everything's a lot cleaner. But they're supposed to get rid of the wash. And that's really the key, right? Because we want closer racing. So allegedly, although we've said this before, and I think we say with every regulation change, allegedly we'll have closer racing and less wash off the car, which is why you do all this, all these changes with the aero anyway.
Yeah.
And everybody's deaf now because I just accidentally bumped my microphone. So just call me Paul Charsley, right?
Yeah. Right.
But anyway, so I think that's going to be interesting, and to see Was Ross Brawn actually able to pay out? Right. That's what we really want to see.
Right.
Did it really, everything he promised us, did it really happen? Because again, if Ross Brawn can't make this work, what hope do we have? None.
That's right. Well, you know what Ross said.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
That's exactly what Ross said.
Yeah, he could be fishing again. So
He could be. And pretty soon, he and Pat Simmons down by the side of a babbling brook, casting their line, fly fishing out there. You know, can you see that? Just a picture of Ross on one side and Pat just a little farther down on the other side, out there casting their lines, trying to catch trout.
I just imagine them at Canada. If we go to Canada this year, I mean, right, we're supposed to, but like the backstretch, they have the channel dug out from where they did rowing for the 80. No, it wasn't the 84 Olympics. That was in Los Angeles. But whatever year they had the Olympics in Canada, and so you see it. It's just like this big, rectangle in the back, and so they always have boat races and stuff back there. But I could just imagine that's where Ross will be hanging out. He'll be in Canada, but he'll be fishing in the rowing, area deck. I don't know what it's called, the rowing area at Canada. That's where we'll see him again, just enjoying his life.
There's a part of me that can see him like, in some stream in northern UK with his, all his fly fishing regalia,
his hip waders,
hip waders and all that. And then there's another part of me that sees him down in a pair of floral swimming trunks, flip-flops, and a wife beater T-shirt out there, with a Zebco Snoopy reel, rod and reel out there fishing. I think that like that last concept of Ross.
So it's like Florida Ross Brawn.
It's Florida man Ross Brawn.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's it.
I like that idea.
It's I think that would confuse people because he would sound very proper and yet be Florida man.
Yeah. Yeah. Flip flops out there.
It'd be kind of like when Top Gear would do the different stigs in different countries, right? And like the American stig was like overweight and slow, right? Like so. In Florida Ross Brawn, which is very different than English Ross Brawn.
Right. The Florida Ross Brawn versus the UK Ross Brawn. I like that.
So basically, I feel like number 2 is, did Ross Brawn lie to all of us? That's how I'm going to encapsulate that.
Right.
Did he do his job, or did he just pull the wool over our eyes?
Right.
It's all on you, Ross Brawn.
It is. And conveniently, there's a lot of, press that, that he and Pat are leaving soon now that they're all done. And it's kind of like, I wouldn't want to be around if the S hits the fan on these regulations either.
I'm out.
So interesting. Let's see. Number 3 for me, I'm just saying rivals is how I've termed this. Will we see the rivals we've been watching develop over the last season or two? And in particular, I'm talking about Ferrari versus McLaren. Will they be facing off with each other behind the Red Bull and Mercedes? Is Red Bull and Mercedes still the rivals? Is Ferrari and McLaren still the rivals behind them? Will Aston Martin and Alpine be hammer and tongs behind the Ferrari and McLaren? Or could AlphaTauri upset that apple cart and get wedged in there? Or will they be back with Alfa Romeo? Will they be battling the Haas, since Haas spent all of their money last year developing their 2022 car and not spending any money on 2021, right? So I'm looking at those rivalries, and I'm just wondering if those will hold true with these big regulation changes. Sometimes when you go through big regulation changes, it can radically upset the running order of a grid, where, it used to be, let's say Renault was, super, super strong, and all of a sudden, with regulation changes, they changed. Think of Red Bull 2013 versus Red Bull 2014. Radical different change, right? And so those rivalries just kind of disappeared with big regulation change. Could it happen to Mercedes? I mean, my hunch is no, because I think Toto runs a great ship and there's some brilliant men and women over at that team. But you never know. So I'm kind of keen to see if those rivalries will just continue to carry on. Yeah, new regulations, but it's the same thing. It's Red Bull versus Mercedes. It's going to be Ferrari versus McLaren, Alpine versus Aston Martin, that kind of thing,
Yeah, I think in absolutely right. Rivalries. That's why you watch any sport, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's always fundamental to why we do what we do. We we like the sports that we like the teams that we like, and you like to see them be able to compete with other good teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I was going to say, or in case of the wild card game between Kansas City and the Steelers, it's just going to be the Chiefs wiping up the green with the Steelers. But in it, nonetheless,
Yay.
I'm prepared. That game is a terrible idea. But anyway, I think that's why you watch, right? And especially when the team you support is doing well, like Kansas City, unlike the Steelers, there's a lot more joy in that, right? So I think what I am most interested in this sort of category is where Otmar Szafnauer goes. So we know he's left Aston Martin, right? So, and Alpine seems to be the big rumor of where he would go. And I think that would be a smart place for him to go. I think Alpine really could use Otmar Szafnauer, but I think his, his talent, his know-how could really tip the scales at one of those teams. If an Alpine or somebody like that, could really, shift the balance of those rivalries for you. And I think that I don't think anybody was really surprised that he left. I think that rumor's been out there for a while, and I think it makes sense that, him and Larry didn't quite, get along, but we don't know where he's going to go, and we don't know how long he's going to be on gardening leave, but I think it'll be interesting what he could bring to a team. And especially I think a team like Alpine that kind of has all the pieces and yet haven't been able to pull it together. Right. Maybe Otmar is what they're missing to kind of pull all those pieces together. Maybe. That's certainly that position, right? That team principal position is supposed to kind of, connect the dots and pull things together. So I don't know, but I think where Otmar lands is going to be big.
It'd be interesting to see what goes on. There's some rumors that Jean Todt is heading back to Ferrari. In what capacity, I don't know, but that he may be going back to Ferrari. Who knows? Maybe Matteo Binotto, maybe he's thinking, look, I've been zooming into the races, virtually, and I have to be here because somebody's got to keep all these Italians focused on making great engines and cars, right? And I need somebody to pit wall, so I get Otmar. Yeah, that would be crazy if he went to Ferrari.
And it's always a big emotion.
It's always a big emotion.
You're right. So I think that absolutely
that would be funny.
Jean Todt. Maybe Jean Todt also just wants to go. I don't see him as a fishing kind of guy. I see him more as like reading a book beside the lake while Ross Braun fishes. But I don't know. Maybe he's a big fisherman.
I guess he's Jean Todt out there, with Ross. Except he'd be one of those like 1920s swimsuit that men used to wear. The whole full body with the shorts,
like in the cartoons.
In the cartoons, right? He'd be out there with that, with like a little
floaty
around him.
You made him like Goofy. Is basically what you made him.
Right. Is Jean Todt out there, with his little floaty on, or water wings on Jean Todt would be good.
Sure,
that would be good. I like it.
That's hilarious.
Anyway,
Jean
Jean, it's great. I'm poking fun at Jean, but he's obviously a very accomplished man, and I have a lot of respect for that. But anyway, it's kind of fun to juxtapose those people. So anyway, that was the rivals. All right, number 4 for me, Dan and Lando. All right, as a longtime fan of one Daniel Ricciardo, I'll be very curious to see if he can get back on top of his game after a year at McLaren. While the Renault deal should have worked but didn't, unfortunately, I really thought that was a perfect fit. I'm wondering if Dan can get the car underneath him to be their top driver at McLaren, and perhaps more importantly, to see if this is Dan's last hurrah in F1 if he doesn't beat Lando, right? So I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on there because, I have a lot of time for Dan. I think he's a great driver. And I was a little surprised when other drivers like Perez and Carlos Sainz and Ocon and everybody else, it took them several races to sort of get on top of their new cars and new teams, but you could see that trajectory, that progress. But with Dan, apart from that win in Italy, it was just a struggle all season long, and it'll be interesting to see if he can get on top. If he can't, I'm a little concerned about him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think so. I think lots of people will be because we're all willing to give you like, you get a year, right?
Yeah. That's a couple years. I'm also curious about the Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz duo. And then obviously, Grace, like you said, I think George Russell and Lewis Hamilton duo. I think that'll be interesting. So there's a couple driver pairings I'm very keen to see what happens. And I think that Dan and Lando is quite a benchmark. That'll be interesting. Carlos Sainz besting Charles Leclerc last year, I'm sure was a little bit of an eye-opener for Charles, right?
Yeah.
And that could see some interesting results there as well.
Yeah. So of course I had McLaren on my list because of course they have to be, one of the top 10 things I'm interested in, but not only as a fan, but I think just as a fan of Formula One, I think Lando has a lot riding on his shoulders, right? He's, as we've talked multiple times throughout this year, like he's stepping from the 18-year-old funny guy to the 21-year-old senior statesman, right? Leading the team, being the veteran at McLaren. And then you have Ricciardo, who certainly we all thought was going to have a much better season than he did. I don't think any of us, even with a race win, I don't think any of us thought he was going to stumble as much as he did this year.
No, I didn't see that coming.
No, I think everybody just said, oh, it'll take him a couple races, to kind of get his sea legs, and then he'll just take off and it'll be fine and we'll never see him again. And that'll be too bad, Lando.
Right.
That is not what's happened. So I agree that of the racing pairs, I am very interested in what McLaren's got going. And then I did also have Ferrari on my list because I think that Ferrari is going to have a lot of thinking to do if Carlos Sainz continues to dominate. They have much like Red Bull, they have 700 drivers and only 2 seats. Yeah. So you have a lot of drivers that you have in your stable chomping at the bits, and there's only so many places you can stash those people. And I'm sure they thought, we'll just use Carlos as a seat holder, right? Like he'll just warm the seat until whoever comes up along that out of the Ferrari Academy that we're ready to put in there. But I don't think you can do that. I think that would be, after this year, I think that would be crazy talk because he's only going to continue to get better. And so
I think the point you bring up is a good one, in that, they signed Charles Leclerc to a long deal.
Yeah, he's there for a long time. So
clearly he's their guy. They signed Carlos to a 2-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but I don't think anyone at Ferrari thought Carlos was going to come in.
No, I don't think they did either. I thought he'd do okay.
Yeah, I thought they figured he'd be there or thereabouts, but I don't know that they thought he'd come in and beat Charles, right? And that, like you said, that prompts teams to make some hard decisions, And I'm not saying at the end of this year would they do anything radical with Charles, but I'm just saying it does sometime refocus your future,
maybe in a good way. I mean, right?
Maybe.
Like you'd rather, I guess, if your plan wasn't going to go as planned, maybe this is the better way for that than to both of them to suck or something like that, right? But they do have a problem in hand because, like you said, right, they signed a 2-year contract with him. I don't think they had any expectation that he was long for the team, but
right.
Whoa, he should be. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, he did a great job. All right. Well, number 5 on my list is, you asked for miracles, I give you the FIA. I am intrigued to see what changes, if any, are made based on the Abu Dhabi incident, and also I am curious to see how the new president approaches his role. Now, Jean Todt was rather, seemingly on the outside looking in, seemed to be rather hands-off with the regulation changes and other initiatives. But will the new president take a longer look at race stewarding, race control, the team, and quest for more consistency within the regulations or rules or stewarding, etc.? Will he immediately begin building his own legacy as FIA president, or simply continue to continue to do the work that Jean Todt was already doing? So I'm kind of curious to see how all of that sort of gels and comes together and what we'll see from the new president. I also wonder if the FIA's investigation into the events at Abu Dhabi don't have an impact on what Lewis decides. It could be Lewis flexing a little in order to get the FIA to make changes he's happy with in their investigation that they announced they were doing about Abu Dhabi on December 15th. And according to Sky Sports, I think Craig Slater said a senior member of Mercedes told him that the longer it's taking the FIA to come to some conclusions on that incident as to what happened, the harder the Lewis Hamilton situation is.
Sure.
So that's an interesting element to this whole thing, whether Lewis comes back or not. Having said that, though, whether the new FIA president believes it was the right or wrong call in Abu Dhabi, or whether or not there are changes to the sporting code to avoid future situations like that, or even change a race procedure to mirror something like IndyCar or NASCAR or other series in order to prevent those kind of endings, that remains to be seen. But in my mind, it's not going to change 2021's results. And even if the new structure is amenable to Mercedes and or Lewis, chances are he's never going to be in that kind of situation again anyway.
Right.
So the point is moot. Yes, it's important for future situations and future races, but in some sense, the point seems to be moot to me. And I understand the point Mercedes and Lewis are making, but at this point, it doesn't really matter what resolution the FIA come up with to prevent this from happening. So therefore, it's important for everyone else and for the future of the sport. Don't get me wrong.
Right, right.
But it's not going to change anything for Mercedes or Lewis now. So therefore, Mercedes and Lewis need to just go ahead and make that decision and get fired up for the next season. You know,
they're not going to give them the World Drivers' Championship. So
no, it's just
roll
not
on,
happen.
right?
So you're gonna have to swallow a bitter pill and energize yourself. Otherwise, that dark cloud hanging over the whole situation has a way of permeating the staff at Mercedes, the rank and file, and you don't want that.
And especially because Lewis was such a positive force at the team, right? Like, so it's one thing, I guess, if I'll just use Kimi Räikkönen as example. Kimi Räikkönen is consistently Kimi Räikkönen. He probably doesn't necessarily, incite deeds of great bravery at Alfa Romeo or any other team he's ever been at, right? He's Kimi Räikkönen. That's not his thing. But Lewis is that kind of guy. Yeah. He is the kind of guy who says hi to everybody, who knows who everybody is, who makes all these connections. And so I think that that's going to play very differently if all of a sudden he's unhappy. But I think that's true for any job that any of us have in some sense, that you know when the end is coming, right? Like you can tell when I just can't do this job anymore. I need to find something else, or when a situation isn't going your way. So I think in racing, that's even more important, that if he isn't feeling it, he shouldn't keep doing it, that he, and especially since he does have other avenues he can pursue. But I just think that it isn't necessarily a field where you can just kind of like half-ass it, if you will, like some of us can do on a Monday, right? Like, I'm having a bad day, I'm going to half-ass it. You really can't do that in Formula One. You have to be all in 111%. So if he's not there, he's not going to stay.
I've said this 1,000 times on this podcast before, but how you react to adversity a lot of times is more important than the actual adversity itself.
Absolutely.
And that's a life lesson that I've had to learn the hard way. And in this case, that team needs leaders. Now, I'm not saying that Toto isn't engaged with the team and leading. Don't get me wrong. He may very well be. I'm just not walking into those offices every morning. But it's the same for Lewis Hamilton, because like you said, Lewis energizes people around him. He energizes that team. And you've got to want to do what you do and work those hours and really work your hardest on behalf of Toto, that team, Mercedes, Lewis, if you're designing Lewis's car or whatever it might be. But all of those elements have to be playing. And I kind of feel like, and maybe Lewis is talking to the team internally and, energizing him, and that's all great. But I think, you just kind of have to move on. That's not to say, and I am interested to see what the FIA comes up with, what's their explanation, what's the resolution going forward, what changes might come from this to prevent these kind of situations from happening again. Is it a white-green checker? Is it, or a green-white checker? I mean, whatever comes out of it comes out of it, but it doesn't really change anything for Merck and Lewis. So
Right.
make the decision, get the energy pump back up in that team, and let's get on with it.
And I think that's part of life as well, right?
Yeah,
Hindsight always changes the rules. I mean, and I think that always has an effect. We all operate from our traumas, right? Like, so rulemaking isn't any different, right? Something bad happened, so we changed the rules because we didn't realize that was a possibility. And no matter how much you carefully craft anything, there's always things that come up that you're like, and that was unexpected, right? So, I mean, I do a lot of contracting at work. What is half the stuff I write in a contract? Stuff that wasn't in some other contract that I realized was problematic, right? And so you're like, yeah, we need to add the sentence in because on this project 12 years ago, this thing happened. And so that's always the case. And as much as you try to mentor or document or whatever, so that doesn't happen, can never eliminate that. And rules in Formula One are no different. And I do think it's very important that they're transparent about it. Any changes that happen, if they change the way Michael Massey operates, if they change the way the stewards, or even if heck, they just get some help for Michael Massey, because that seems to be a big problem too. That I think that is important for the sport, even though, like you said, that isn't going to help Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton in this moment. It will help the future of the sport.
Right. All right. For number 6 on my list, the Miami Gardens Grand Prix.
Yeah, that was on my list too, of course, right? The parking lot. How could it not be?
Yeah, right. So I've only seen some construction pics at this point, but I'm very interested in how this whole event will go. Will it be highly attended? And will it be the new favorite race in the U.S.? Will it be better than Austin? Because as F1 has said all along, that Miami is a destination city and a population center.
It's not that close to Miami, though.
Yeah, well, that's what they said. We got to go to Miami. Well, you didn't go to Miami. You went to Miami Gardens.
Right.
So I'm not saying it will do all those things to Austin, because I think Austin COTA is great and
much closer.
And much closer, right?
COTA actually is in Austin. I mean, you do have to drive outside of the city, but which of course I think you have to do with any track except for Montreal. But but it is within driving distance. I think it is realistic to call that track in Austin. I'm not sure Miami. Because Miami, that's the other thing too. Unless you're in South Beach, I think when people think of Miami, they think of South Beach. That isn't all of Miami either. And so how close you are to South Beach is really what you're aiming for. It's kind of like, right. We're talking about, the New York City Grand Prix that Bernie always wanted to have in New Jersey, right? New Jersey is not New York City. And that river is wide enough that there's a difference, right? So I think that's the same thing they're going to face, is that if people, and I wouldn't know, right? Like if this was in some other country that I don't live in, I have no idea, but I've been to Miami. It's a big place. What people call Miami is pretty expansive, and this isn't in South Beach, which is what people want. And so being able to get from South Beach to some other part of Miami Gardens, it's not the same, but I wouldn't know in some other country. So people are going to come here and be like, what's this shit? This looks like a concrete parking lot. Where's all the fun? Where's the beaches? Where's the that doesn't exist there. So yes, I think absolutely if it happens, because it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't happen. And what comes of a very flat, concrete parking lot kind of race. I don't have very high hopes, but and I don't see how it's going to usurp Austin, because that's such a great track. It's always a great race. I think that, Austin, because they really took like the best turns of every other track and put it in a track. That's not what they're going to be doing here. So I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, the first year, there's going to be some interest, because the first year it'll be more interesting and you'll get more locals that'll be interested in it, but that'll fade off.
Maybe Miami will take the best corners of the Caesar Palace parking lot race and then reproduce
exactly.
Them, so I don't know.
Exactly. The same Jersey barriers will be used. From the 80s.
As Valencia, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. If only it had the bridge, right? Valencia would have been great.
Right. So
here,
I'm also very interested to see if Austin will renew or extend its contract this year.
They have to. What are you doing, Austin? What are you doing to us? That's a great track. Don't-
for sure.
So I think the metric will be who will have more fans, the Miami Dolphins or the race at Miami Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'll be the true
Right.
test.
Yeah, laces
Who will
out.
be more popular?
Yeah.
So I did want to also add under sort of races. I was thinking like, what races am I most interested in this year? I think I'm really interested in seeing what Singapore will look like, because I think that's a track that really pushes the drivers and will
Mhm.
really push the cars with the new regulation. So I think Singapore, even though it's later in the season, and you tend to really look at the beginning, I think that's a track that
Yeah,
I'm going to be interested to see how that one rolls out with the
right.
with the drivers later in the season.
I
'Cause
think
it's
Saudi
really
Arabia too. Get another race under its belt.
yeah.
You know that I don't know that there's something that was intriguing about that, but there's a lot of negativity around the track, the country, everything like that. So
Yeah.
I'll be kind of just interested to see that again. So anyway, I don't know. Let me go to number 7. I'm calling this one the Red Bull dilemma. So if Sergio Perez,
Oh, this is a big dilemma. Yeah.
that Sergio Perez,
You like my face? You like it?
yes, I do, Sergio. If he does really well this year and gets on top of this year's car and scores big points, what will Red Bull do with Pierre? Will they extend Sergio's contract, knowing they may well lose Pierre to another team? Is that a bad thing if Sergio is driving very well and is more of a team player, or has at least shown that he's willing to be a team player with Max, than what I would assume Pierre Gasly is wanting to do, which is just show up and play nursemaid to Max or wingman to Max Verstappen, which I can't imagine Pierre would be as motivated to do as Sergio is willing to do. So there is a dilemma there, I think, for Red Bull. And a lot of that has to do on Sergio's performance, but we'll see. I'll be very intrigued to see what happens.
And I think just like we were talking about with Ferrari, I think that, they had expectations for what role Sergio would fill, and he's exceeded that. And that hasn't happened with any other second driver. We all joke that seat's cursed for any number of reasons that have to do with how Red Bull runs the team. But Sergio Perez seems to have he fits right in there. He's able to be an individual and a leader when he needs to be. He's able to, take team orders as they come and, do what he needs to do to help Max Verstappen. So I think he's really been a dream for that team, but I don't know that they were expecting it, much like with Ferrari, right? Like this is not where Red Bull necessarily expected themselves to be. And yeah, right. And in addition to Pierre Gasly, they also have a stable of 700 drivers that have gone through the Red Bull program that don't have a seat. So yeah, I do think that's interesting on what will happen with Sergio.
It's kind of like a Nancy Drew mystery, the cursed seat of Mark Webber.
It is indeed. He's like the Babe Ruth of Formula One, right?
Yeah, it's Mark Webber's. Or is it David Coulthard's seat? I don't know. It's the cursed seat anyway. Yeah, I'll be very interested to see what Red Bull decides there. The Sergio Pereira Albon sort of decision. That will be very intriguing.
I think for a team that I haven't mentioned so far that I'm interested in, I think what Aston Martin's going to do. So earlier, right, I mentioned that Mark Schaffner's left, but I think that, Lawrence Stroll has been a heavy force in that team. He has a very specific way of managing the team. And I think that we've been talking about them in all of their incarnations: Force India, Racing Point, Tracing Point, and now into Aston Martin.
Right.
This team really just has to get it together. They have to get over the hurdle. They have to be up there competing with McLaren and Ferrari. And we don't know how long they'll have Vettel. We don't know who else they'll bring up behind. We don't know that, Stroll will be a veteran.
I think Lance a lot.
I want it now. What's the matter with those twats down there?
I mean, I think that's the point. I think we've seen that Lance is getting better. He is improving, but is he their should he be their number one driver? That's another question. Right. Exactly. So I think that's a team that I still am like, well, Larry, I hope you got a big plan here for this team, because your team seems to be falling apart at the seams, and you've only been there for 2 years now. So
Boy, Larry.
yeah. So I think that Aston Martin, also has a bit of dilemma, although very different
Yeah.
from Red Bull's.
Yeah. I agree. Aston Martin has some tough choices coming up for sure. Let's see. Number 8 on my list, budget cap. I am very intrigued to see what impact the cost cap has on not only the initial design, but more importantly, I think, is all of the in-season car development. The war continues all season long, folks, and those with resources typically outdeveloped the smaller teams that had limited resources. Now, how have the teams found ways to keep this continual development cycle going all year long with this established cost cap? I think that'll be very interesting. If the team spent a lot of money designing the car, they come out, they hit the bricks, and it's nowhere and it needs serious development, will they have the cash to seriously develop it, or do we just chuck in and say that's a lost year? There's some problems I have with notions like that. I have problems when a team can't develop their way out of a hole, because then you're basically telling the team to write the year off. It's like, well, you showed up with a hybrid, but you can't develop. You don't have tokens.
Right.
You got the token says you can't develop. Yeah. Why are you doing? Let them develop and close their gap.
Right.
Let them develop their car and become more competitive in that season, because when you don't, then you're basically, the whole season's a write-off for this team, and that's not good, you know? So that's a tough thing. So anyway, budget cap is what I mentioned.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that how that affects, and I think as we talked about, I think it was last week, how any discrepancies are going to be doled out. Like, what does punishment look like, right? So
right.
I think that's something that'll be really interesting. The first time somebody does some creative accounting, what does the FIA do with that, right? Because it's going to happen, right?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, for sure. Number 9 on my list is Drive to Survive. Yep, you got it. The Netflix.
Netflix are real bunch, aren't they?
Yes, Dan, they are. Drive to Survive. Here's what I'm curious about, folks. I'm curious how Drive to Survive will position this last season. Will they be even-handed? Will they lean one way or the other on Abu Dhabi? And the reason I ask this is because Drive to Survive has been accused by many people on social media as being the catalyst as to why the Abu Dhabi decision was made, i.e. for entertainment value, not for racing or legitimate regulations, right? And a lot of people say, well, this is what happened when you just do it for the sport and Drive to Survive and blah, blah. Lots of people, there was a big blowback on Drive to Survive and Netflix out of this thing. And I'm sure Netflix is thinking, whoa, wait a minute, we didn't make that call, So anyway, I'll be very interested to see how do they do this. How will F1 and Netflix work together to position not only this season, but really that last race? Will they soften the blow? Will they level off at FIA and F1? Or will they take the high road? And it's a delicate line they run there, Grace. Yeah. Because of all the people that have watched all the seasons that are heavily invested in that show, if they feel put upon by Abu Dhabi and Netflix glosses over it, that they could lose some viewers there.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're concerned about that. They probably have plenty of viewers and they gain more viewers every year. But
yeah, probably.
I do think, especially with the how they're just embedded with one team in a race, I think to me that's the most, from a director's perspective, I guess, how they have to craft the narrative, because it's not like they're in all of the teams and they're like, oh, McLaren won this one, or we know the ending of this story, so we know to build up the hype around Max Verstappen now, because we know that in 10 races he wins, right?
Right.
But they aren't always embedded with the right team. And so that comes out.
It would be funny if Abu Dhabi, they were embedded with Haas.
Yeah.
And that's all we got was like Haas. And they can wash their hands of the whole thing. It's like, we weren't following Mercedes or Red Bull in that last race, so we don't really have an opinion. But we followed Haas's race.
Yeah, they'll just cut right to Max winning the world championship. That's all they have footage of.
Right.
So
That
I
would
think
be
that's
funny.
going to be the bigger issue for them.
Yeah.
And how they kind of cast the foreshadowing, I guess, is what I'm
Yeah,
getting
right.
at for the whole
Right.
season, because they know the ending
Yeah.
when they're doing the editing. So
Right.
how do you kind of balance that? And especially because I think that Christian Horner has a bit of a revisionist history going on there when he speaks. And so he often, Levi, you are not in this podcast. He will often say, oh, well, blah, 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 Mercedes. And I'm like, really? Is that really what happened? Or is that really how Mercedes is operating this season? So I think it is easy to get caught up in our expectations of what Mercedes is every year in and out. And this year didn't work out that way for them. But Red Bull kind of played up that narrative of like, oh, Mercedes, how they are. They'll figure it out. And it'll be interesting to see if Drive to Survive kind of follows like what I would call Christian Horner's revisionist history of what this last season was. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
I agree. And
yeah,
finally,
really
number
interesting.
10 is the TPF podcast. I am curious to see if we grow, if we gain more Patreon supporters. Will we finally figure out how to stream all of our shows live with live interaction on YouTube or other platforms? Is Twitter Spaces a better place to do this, or Twitch? All these different things. I'm trying to figure out which is what, because I had a lot of people saying, hey, since you're not editing these podcasts and you guys have been doing it so long, you don't need to. You just record live and let it roll. If that's the case, why not just do them live on YouTube, and then we could interact in the comment section and all that. And I'm all for that. I just got to figure out how I can manage that. I got to write notes, do the podcast, do the recording and all that. But I would want to make sure that if I have people interacting, that we aren't orphaning them. And so anyway, but I'm kind of excited to see what'll happen.
Do we get an assistant? Like at some point.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, like, I get it. Like, you're right. Like I watch Mark Priestley does that, right? Like where he's like reads questions and he answers them. I'm like, wow, I don't know. That seems like I need a person.
Well, we got to get Atticus or Huxley to help us out on that.
Yeah,
one.
right. I don't know. And then always off the cuff is always something too, because of course you always think of the best things like right after the podcast ends up like, why didn't I say that?
Yeah, right. I know.
So I think I'm all but I'm all for trying it. Like why not? Right? We can try it and see what happens, see if it works, see if it doesn't work.
Worst case scenario, just kind of a train wreck of an episode, and everybody I think would forgive us that.
We move on. Yeah, it's fine.
Mhm.
I think the only other thing I had on my list is that I'm also welcome back, Alex Albon. Even though you'll be at Williams, but I look forward to seeing some redemption for Alex Albon.
And I give you these two Albons. Both are hardworking and serve you well. All right.
That's right.
Fair enough. Speaking of Albon, it's time for Albon's Cats. That's right. Alex Albon has cats. Well, some of you may not even know who won the last race or 2 races ago, or who won in Hungary. You may not know those answers, but you know the names of Albon's cats, and that's what this segment is all about, Grace. Grace started the Albon's cats, and
he also has a horse.
Yeah, well, he would.
Pinky the
would.
horse.
A guy like you would. All
I have a
right.
horse.
So before I get into Todd's no shit headlines, what do you have for Albon's cats?
So I had made the note when we had done our resolutions. Was that 3 podcasts ago? I don't know. It just all blurs together. And I'll blame the snow. And I had one of my resolutions, right, was to be kinder and gentler to Max Verstappen. Like maybe I should stop referring to him as the highly talented Pastor Maldonado that I believe he is. So
Bring the car back then, please, Pastor.
Yes.
I did learn that he has cats. He has 2 cats.
Oh.
And so I feel like, oh, well, first of all, I can't believe nobody's pointed that out to me all season, that he got cats during the season, that he's all, that they always had cats growing up, and that, I don't know, I missed that, but, they're very cute. So he has 2 cats. So I guess all the more reason that I guess I should be, nicer to Max Verstappen.
Yes.
This year is that, he's a cat guy.
Well, there you go. See, you knew there was something that you really liked about him.
I guess everybody has at least one redeemable quality, right?
Sure they do. All right, cool. I like it. All right, so let me jump into Todd's No Shit headlines. This segment is where all I do is read the headlines of news stories in the Formula One press, and you just let those steep and sit where they are. Okay.
This first one is great.
We're just going to focus on the headlines. The first headline I got is Sebastian Vettel should return to Red Bull and team up with Max Verstappen, says Bernie Eccleston.
What the hell? That's great. That's
There
great,
you go.
Bernie Eccleston. What are you smoking, old man? Good Lord. That's great.
I liked it.
Sure.
Why not?
He's just randomly spouting stuff.
Yeah, why not?
That's
yeah,
great.
just okay.
Sure.
Fair enough.
Just up, whatever contracts, whatever Sergio Perez.
Whatever.
Go back to the team you haven't raced for in 10 years. Sure.
That's right. Why
Just
not?
go back to Red Bull.
Why not? But not to
That's
be
great.
outdone, Bernie Eccleston also says this.
By himself. Right.
Yes. Bernie Eccleston says race director Michael Massey was, quote, overwhelmed by the 2021 season.
Weren't we all?
It's no shit. Really?
Yeah, exactly.
He said, and if you go on and read the article, he said, but he says it was the right decision to make. He said, but Michael, you thought he was overwhelmed by the 2021 season. Then he made the comment, he goes, I don't even know if he should have been in that role, to be honest with you. But
Wow.
whoa,
Bernie Eccleston.
yeah,
Old man. Good Lord.
Ooh,
You
yeah.
aren't even in the sport anymore.
I know. It's like, ooh, brutal.
That is that.
Yeah.
Well, I would have never put him in charge anyway. So
Yeah.
congratulations for making the right decision, even if it's
I know.
completely controversial.
Gives you the impression Michael's running around the track going, "Help me, Tom Cruise!"
Yeah,
It's
I don't
crazy.
think Michael Massey was like. He was kind of. I think he would have always taken over this role, but he was thrust into this role in a moment that he was not prepared for. So, I don't know. Just bring it down a notch, Bernie. Like, that's great.
I know.
He shouldn't be there anyway. But congratulations, you made
So
the right
you go
decision.
for he shouldn't have been. Then there's some of you think he's completely cool and calculated, like
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard.
That's right.
So there you go. Let's see. Next up in the headlines, the no S headlines is this one. Quote, let's F shit up. End quote.
All right.
Dash. Watch F1 champ Verstappen and boxing king Canelo get crowd going at Miami New Year's Eve party.
Who knew? I didn't know Max was at the New Year's Eve party.
Who knew? I didn't know.
I didn't know either.
Now, was he in Miami or Miami Gardens?
Again, I'm pretty sure he was in South Beach.
South
I'm pretty
Beach.
sure he wasn't in Miami Gardens.
Right. You see him out in the parking lot getting the dance going,
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this one I found intriguing. This headline I thought you guys would enjoy. F1 CEO receives a, quote, dead dog from PETA activists as Liberty Media come under pressure.
What did they do?
You're like, what? Wait. So someone Stefano Domenicali a dead dog? Why?
I assume it's not literally a dead dog, first of all, but why? What did they do?
It is in quotes.
Right.
Dead dog in quotes.
Well,
Yeah.
and I assume that if they actually sent him a dead dog, I would have somehow, got a Twitter notification, something. That seems like
yeah.
I think that seems like not something that literally rolls into your mail every day. It's just
Right.
dead animals. But
Well, I mean, it beats him waking up with a horse head in his bed.
well, I guess it really depends. Maybe he really is into dog racing. I don't know, right?
No,
I mean, a
it was because Liberty Media was supporting Iditarod.
Oh.
Who knew?
So then, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, because the horse's head only works if you're really into horses, right? So it would have to be like
right.
it would be like the neck of a guitar in your situation, right? Not a horse's head, right? Because
Right.
it should be
Right.
something that you really value, which may or
Well,
may not be
maybe
a
if
horse.
they just brought a dead Ferrari to Stefano, that would have been more meaningful. Like,
Maybe.
look, there's a lunchbox Ferrari, or there's a 250 LM or something, and it doesn't work. That would be meaningful to him. And he would say,
guess.
"Oh my gosh,"
Yeah, you need a
Who
toe,
knows?
I can get you a toe. But I
Right,
think
right.
that all right, that's a odd. Peter,
Yeah, it is odd. Yeah, it's an odd thing. So there you go. That
But
was it.
they're
Right.
but I was just gonna say I don't know if this is still their like CEO, but the CEO of PETA at one point was a big Ferrari fan, and they had T-shirts that were the Tifosi, but they were the Tofu Fosi. And they had a whole bunch of like Tifosi themed, tofu themed shirts because he was a Ferrari fan. But I think it was a PETA.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. There is space for those worlds to live together.
Yeah, apparently.
I don't know.
Apparently.
All right.
All right. Well, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
Let's see. First up is a longtime supporter and listener, our dear friend Mike Stack, who's a wonderful guy out on the West Coast, the left side of America, or at least he was. He says this: I would like to add that for mental reasons, I have ordered a new Parc Fermé t-shirt. The reason is because A, although F1 rules are changing, the median key fob price at the F1 stores remain at about $286.
Yeah, that's right.
The exciting 40% off emails, the F1 store email applies to a single extra small shirt of a design that obviously no one wanted on this earth, except maybe Lewis. They have a somewhat leftover items branded with Pastor Maldonado. I clicked onto the thumbnail to see what they were, but the server continued to crash. So I say the new TPF t-shirts are the answer. Get one for your loved ones. Get one for your cat. You will be fashionable and occasionally insightful.
That is correct.
Played, Mike.
Valentine's Day is coming up, people.
That's right. Well played, Mike. You're a good man.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Continue to crash. That's
let's see.
I will.
Brian,
I was gonna say before you move on, I did toy within my top 10 list if I should put like, will I be able to afford AlphaTauri wear? Will it ever go on sale? Will there ever be anything in that collection that I'll be able to own and wear? I don't know. It just is crazy how much their clothing are.
Will you be able to find some Maldonado gear?
That's strange. I wonder what's causing all the accidents.
That would be great. I would love some Maldonado gear.
Wouldn't it?
I should have jumped on that opportunity when I had it.
Yeah, I know. We all should have.
Who knew?
I know. Let's see. Brian asks, hi, Todd and Grace, and possibly Paul. There's no Paul, unfortunately. He said not sure since it's off season. I was looking into getting some audiobooks on F1, just wondering what recommendations you would have. Thank you for always having the time to answer our questions, Brian from Austin. Well, Brian, it's a great question. Admittedly, I haven't followed the audiobooks of F1 books as closely as the books themselves. I'm assuming a lot of them do have audio versions, but I don't know if like Sir Jackie Stewart's autobiography is on audio or not. If it is,
oh, I hope he reads it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure, because then you'd be treated to, all kinds of awesomeness.
This looks like a bit of a hairy monster.
It's a great car.
Aerodynamics come in at any speed. Positive directional stability.
All in all, the car is very good on the road.
Ford, I think, have done such a good job on the Temple.
There you go.
Exactly.
Sir Jackie. So anyway, that's a great one. But I can tell you a good place to start is our friend Steve Matchett's books.
Yeah, those are definitely on my list. Yeah.
And Steve has audio versions of his books, but the beauty is Steve reads them. Right?
Oh, very good.
So you get that dulcet, wonderful tone and cadence of Steve's wonderful voice, and he reads his books. So if you haven't started there, I would say run, don't walk, and get Steve Matchett's books would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and they would be nice to listen to. I got Neil deGrasse Tyson's Astrophysics for the Very Busy or whatever, his, Astrophysics for Dummy book. I literally understand nothing, but it was so nice listening to that audiobook. So I could see like Steve Matchett also has a very nice voice that would just be nice to listen to, much like Neil deGrasse Tyson, that I didn't understand any of it, but 5 stars, loved it. It was great to listen to. Right.
That'd be great. So that would be my recommendation, Brian. Let's see. Miles asks what.
Oh, wait, I thought there was more. Wait, that was it?
That's it. Do you have more?
I had audiobooks.
Oh, okay. Hit me. What do you got?
I mean, I of course agree. Like Steve Matchett's books are great.
Yeah.
I also, although my other 3 books are not suggestions that are Formula One, but I did think they were great. I think that, although I read all 3 of them, but I'm sure I listen to more audiobooks now than I used to, but these are all 3 books that I read as opposed to listening to. But Barry Sheen's book, his biography, which was great. I know. I said none of the remaining ones are F1, right? So he was a motorcycle racer.
He says some audiobooks on F1.
you know what? Is he doing this show or am I doing this show? I'm doing this show. Okay. So what I'm saying to you is I realize that you didn't ask for MotoGP, but I'm telling you that book on Barry Sheehan is so good. Just close your eyes and pretend it's about Formula One. It's a great book. Just
it's
enjoy
about racing, damn it.
Right. And he, much like Michael Schumacher, is somebody you should know about, even if you aren't a MotoGP fan. So just read the damn book, and I'm sure listening to it would be great. So take that. I also, another not Formula One recommendation, because I'm doing this podcast and not you, sir. I also really liked Valentino Rossi's book. His biography was very interesting, and and
it's
Valentino
a page
Rossi's
turner. It just is.
And I don't know if he reads his own book, but that would also be great if he does. I would listen to it. I would listen to it as opposed to read it if he does his own book. That would be really fun. And then I really would recommend Janet Guthrie's autobiography. Again, not Formula One, but a great book, and also somebody who any auto racing fan should be familiar with. So Janet Guthrie,
and
lovely person.
I'm waiting for Toto's book.
Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
That's what I'm waiting
for. The audiobook, though, has to be recorded in the black turtleneck on the gray cement wall. That is...
Yes. Yeah, like THX 1138. Exactly.
Right. And I also, because there was an interview a couple seasons ago with Toto Wolff that clearly he's also much more Albon's Cats than he is anything else, because they asked him, like, what was his favorite race this season? He was like, Austria. And they're like, you were terrible at Austria. He's like, oh, but it's close to my house. Right. Which is also how I would pick my favorite race. Right. Austin, it's the closest to my house. I can sleep in my own bed tonight. Right. So, and so he's like asking people off camera, like, what race did we do good at? Oh, Hungary. We did good, or wherever. Right. Yeah. So those were the tracks he liked. He clearly didn't remember from track to track. So, awesome. His book would be great because you'd have to have a ghostwriter or Wikipedia or something, because it was very clear that he's also much better with the Albon's Cats than he is what races they've won in any given season.
Right. Oh, that's good.
So I'm sorry, they're not Formula One recommendations, but still great books.
All right. One I would not recommend is that. The
Ross Brown book.
Yeah, but it's not really Ross. It's just Ross commenting on something. Adam Parr's book, whatever that was.
Yes, that was not.
that was not good.
Total design. It was something. Pressure
total,
comes to mind.
Total disaster. Total.
I don't know.
Letdown. Total waste of money. Yeah, there's a lot of totals money.
There. That's the second version. The reprint is total waste of money.
Yeah, second edition.
I agree.
With forward by, Yes. All right. Finally, Miles asks, would F1 over the last couple of years been better if Mercedes and Red Bull didn't exist? With the new engine rule changes, I've been trying to think about what, as an audience, we want. Is it more parity across the grid, similar to what the midfield battle between Alpine, McLaren, Ferrari, AlphaTauri, and Aston has been like? Or do we want a duel between two teams at the top? I can't really decide which is more interesting. Thoughts? Well, first, Miles, a great question. My answer to the first part of your question would be no. Mercedes and Red Bull are vital, absolutely essential to F1's entire program, as is Ferrari, McLaren, et cetera, But the amount of money and resources that Mercedes and conversely Red Bull pour into that series keeps that series alive. So Mercedes having achieved amazing things in their time in Formula One, Red Bull, same thing, and Ferrari, et cetera, McLaren. So they absolutely should be there. That's the first part. I read the results from dozens and dozens of fan surveys over the years. And I've read tons of them, and there's been tons of them, right? And all of these surveys, all the fans are saying, oh, we want more passing. We want more passing. But I think that's not the best answer because the questions aren't really crafted as they should be. So Grace, this happens to be her day job. She knows this incredibly well on how to solicit the kind of content. We've talked about this numerous times on past podcasts where Grace has unpacked how to do a Formula One survey and what kind of things you want to look for. So Grace can speak at length to that. But the point is the questions weren't formatted correctly to get the kind of
Right.
real information that we need, that we really want, right? I don't think you have a point that's speak to like passing. I'm not really a big fan of that, because I think they're saying, well, we want more passing. That's not actually what they were saying.
Right.
And so I think that if you're saying, well, do we want more parity between teams? And if there was more passing, there'd be more parity between teams. I'm not.
I don't think that's the same. I do want more parity, but I don't think more passing necessarily makes more parity.
Yeah, I understand that for sure, but I'm not a real big fan of that, because it negates the genius in favor of the regulated.
But I think what you want is the opportunity. I mean, that's true in anything, right? You and I could both go run a marathon, and you may do better at it than I am, but I don't want it to be because you have a better wind tunnel, or you have a better physio, or you have a better, like, I want it to be because you beat me. And I think that's what people want. I think that Formula One by design is always going to be, it's not a spec series, right? If you really want that kind of parity, right, you're going to have to look to a spec series, right? Yeah, which I don't know if still exists. But anyway, when I watched NASCAR 25 years ago, that was a thing. Anyway, but I think what you want is that you want the ability for teams to have some movement, both on the track at any given time, across the year. You don't want it to just be every week it's the same, it's Verhambot week after week after week in one order or another. And that, yes, of course, there are going to be teams that do really well. See any team that Tom Brady is a quarterback for, right? You're going to have that. Or, whoever Kevin Durant's playing with, that's always going to be the case, but you want the opportunity to exist that you could do better. And I think that's hard for people to see in Formula One because it's not always there.
Yeah, it's not. I think that, like I said, the parody and saying, I'd like, that, I don't know. I when I look at it, I think that F1 makes their hiring decision based on the gray matter within. And neutering a guy like Adrian Newey through strictly limited regulation, shutting down innovation, is not something I'm keen on doing.
No,
what I would rather see is regulations that balance aero with power and the driver input, and
You're
no
right.
constructs like HD tires and DRS. If you could get a balance between aero innovation and ingenuity and aero performance, and a balance between the engine and power delivery and output, and also include a particular element of driver input and driver skill. I know that's a perfect world, but if you could get those three sort of balanced, I think then you would have what you were kind of looking at. But what you've got in Formula One is you have always had the haves and the have-yachts, right? And so these people with very huge budgets, I understand that, and maybe this will work, this cost cap, but yeah, I don't think it's just parody.
What you're speaking to, there's a Ray Bradbury, isn't it his short story where they talk about like putting the weights on the ballerinas so that they all perform the same way, right? That's not what we're asking for when we say parody. We're not asking you to put weights on all the really talented ballerinas so that all the ballerinas are the same. That seems crazy if you've never read this story, but I'm going to hope that people know the story I'm talking about, right? So what you don't want is, everybody to be the same, but what you want is the ability to use that genius. You want Adrian Newey to be able to be successful, but you also don't want it just to be at the detriment of other teams. You want the opportunity to be spread across all of the teams. And so, but if you have Adrian Newey, congratulations, he's really smart and he's going to really make a great car, even though he starts from styrofoam and wood and doesn't make a CAD drawing first. So I think there is a place for that opportunity without having to neuter every other team. So you're just putting weights on all the ballerinas.
Yeah, it's a fine balance there. And I think it's a great point, Miles, about what is it you really want to see? Do you want to see, in my mind, I would like to see the innovation factor allow for some clever engineering and designing to come up with a scenario where you've got Mercedes versus Red Bull versus Ferrari versus McLaren. If you had 3 or 4 teams that could win and battle at the sharp end of the grid, that would be anywhere from 6 to 8 cars that could potentially win, which would be great if it wasn't just 2 teams. And for 7 years, it was just 2 drivers within the same team, right? Which is not exciting. So I think to your point, Grace, I think it is that.
It's Kurt Vonnegut. I'm sorry.
Kurt Vonnegut.
It's Kurt Vonnegut. I was like, somebody's out there yelling at me. And if Flip was in earshot, he would yell at me because he knows exactly those stories. So it's a short story by Kurt Vonnegut called Harrison Bergeron. Right. But that's the whole idea, is that the government gives everybody a handicap so that everybody's the same. And it's a terrible world to live in.
Right.
We don't want that world either. And I think that's similar to the, like, everybody can just pass all over the place. Like, that's a terrible world to live in as well. But this world we're currently living in may not be the best world either. So maybe we can find some way to find some parity, but yet still have a place for genius inventions. Nobody wants to put weights on Adrian Newey's brain either.
No. It's not good. So anyway, but a great question, Miles. I appreciate it. Awesome.
And there's another good book for Brian to read that isn't Formula One related, but is a very good short story as well.
Next thing you're going to ask me is, who's John Galt?
Kurt Vonnegut. That's great.
Kurt Vonnegut. All right.
There you go.
That does it for this podcast, but
that's
you can
insight.
Share your opinion. Yes, that is insight. Occasionally.
Just I'm good for like 3 weeks now.
Yeah, why didn't you just ask me about MotoGP books? I could have told you a bunch of those.
It's a really good book.
You're getting an argument from me. So anyway, stop by the website, theparcferme.com. Share your opinion. Just do it to decorum civility as always. Tell us what the top 10 things you're most excited about in the 2022 season. I'm sure there's some that we completely haven't thought about, like could Karun Chandhok's jeans be any tighter in 2022? I don't know. There's a lot of good and insightful questions about that. So, keep them coming. Let us know. There you go, Barry.
Yeah, I got it. It's on the bookshelf right there.
There it is.
And maybe Nick Harris reads the audiobook, which would be great too.
Welcome back. Yes. Does anybody have anything for Barry shit? Anyway. Right. Be sure to go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, give us some love over there. As always, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters out there. We could not and would not do this podcast without you, and it was wonderful to have our Patreon chat on Sunday. Enjoyed that very much. And until next week, when we come back to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camper, saying so long, Grace.
See you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.